Offender with Georgia Tolley
on Dubai Eye 103.8.
Hello there and welcome back. Now, there have been some major changes over the last, I suppose it's 18 months that we've seen a lot of changes in both the criminal and civil laws here in the United Arab Emirates. And they've always been announced in the framework of, we've had 50 years of the UAE and now we're preparing for the next 50 years. But certainly many of the changes have really been lauded by the international community as well as the local community in the legal profession here. And there has been another recent change that came through regarding the drugs laws. Now, this was a law that was announced back in January. But of course, it's one thing to have a law announced. It's another thing to have it implemented. And I believe it is now, 3 months after it has been introduced, it has started to be implemented. We are starting to see the effects of this new drugs law. And in essence, the sort of one of the consequences of the new law is that convicted drug offenders who were deported from the United Arab Emirates can now appeal to return to live here again. It was outlined in the revised drug law. The legislation also provides a degree of leniency for first-time offenders, largely drug users, and it makes rehabilitation a priority. However, of course, the penalties for traffickers and dealers does remain severe. Joining us to discuss the changes in a bit more detail is Dr. Hassan Elhais. He is a legal consultant at Alrashedi and Associates here in the UAE, and he joins me on the line on Microsoft Teams. Dr. Elhais, how are you? Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on the line. Now, I know that you're a very experienced lawyer here in the United Arab Emirates. Could you outline a little bit about the change in the law, what it actually changed?
Actually, the changes included the philosophy of the law, which now is dealing with the drug offender not as a criminal, but as a person who needs help and needs treatment. The new law already gives the court the right for the first offender to award the offender to be admitted in one of the medical institutes to get a treatment instead of getting punished. Besides that, the new law already gives the second chance, beside the changes which happened already in the criminal law as well, it gives the second chance for the offender who has been sentenced before to get deported to apply for the reconsideration of the decided sentence and to remove the awarded deportation. Actually, this law will give the chance to a lot of well-skilled workers who have been deported previously to come back to the country and to contribute to the community and to be productive members in the community instead of losing them from the business environment in the UAE.
It's really interesting to hear there that the principle, that the philosophy of the law is changing to be much more sympathetic to sort of first-time users, so to speak. I can see on your TV, can you hold the microphone ever so slightly closer? Because the line isn't perfect, but, that's what we have to deal with now we're doing things virtually, so to speak. I mean, so how about if you are a repeat offender or you are a dealer? Are the penalties still severe in those circumstances?
Of course. For the dealers, the sentence is still severe. It could include jail term, which could end with lifetime jail term. Usually, with the dealers, the case get transferred to Abu Dhabi, the federal courts. With regards to the second-time offender, the sentence would be more likely jail term, although it could be fine, but it's quite unlikely. It's the implementation of the law shows that the first offender usually doesn't get deported unless we have exceptional scenarios. But with the second offender, we may expect the deportation to be applied, since the law applied it as sentence to be awarded by the discretionary power of the court.
It's so interesting that you now don't get deported for the first use. I think that anecdotally, I don't think very many people know that. And I know it is a huge deterrent as a consequence, the possibility that you could get deported. I know that parents of young teenagers certainly use it as another reason for why their children need to be very careful out here with experimentation, for example. I mean, have you heard of people being deported because of drug taking?
Yes, many.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough.
More than what you think. Previously, applying the deportation was mandatory.
Oh, wow.
It was for that's the first time we get the deportation to be optional for the last tens of years, and we saw a lot of sad cases for students in college and workers in very very high profile and in very high position to get deported for a very minimal small amount of drugs. Actually, one of the biggest advantage as well, which we found in the new law, is dealing with the visitors or the tourists who come to the UAE for the first time, or even the resident who comes and he doesn't know that the drugs here is a crime, or maybe he got material from countries who are using drugs, drugs food, or drugs shampoo, or drugs drink taken from marijuana that is illegal in the UAE. Such individual, when they came previously, they got deported and they could face criminal charges. But according to the new law, they shouldn't be deported. The material just has to be taken, and then it will be destroyed, and the person will be invited to go to the country without any criminal records if it was his first time.
That feels like a really big change. And have you had experience of an individual going through that process now and a different punishment being implemented?
There will be no punishment, and we wouldn't know about them.
Okay.
They will be accepted to attend, and there is no criminal record. But previously, I dealt with, and our office dealt with many cases where such tourist or resident would face severe consequences without knowing that what they did is illegal. Especially that sometimes they don't know even that the material they have has marijuana in its content.
I understand. I mean, are there rehab centres here in the UAE that people can be sent to?
The new law organized this point that rehabilitation could be admitted in one of the licensed institutes, medical institutes, and there will be a committee established by the new law, where this committee will be the one to decide whether the person could take such treatment or not, and when he has to be discharged or released. However, the law indicated that the maximum period for treatment shall not exceed more than 1 year, which is very reasonable because it put limits of the fear for people who think that maybe we will stay for rehabilitation for endless time or for a long-term period, that the 1 year will be anyway the maximum which could be awarded or sentenced for rehabilitation for any offender.
It's really interesting to see how this law has shifted. As you mentioned earlier, the philosophy of the law has shifted to rehabilitation of the offender rather than prosecution. But of course, I imagine it's not the same for people who are caught for dealing, for example.
Of course. Dealers remain considered as criminals and serious criminals. They may face serious consequences which could reach lifetime jail or even death sentence in some cases. The cases will be more likely decided by Abu Dhabi federal courts. Even the bail, previously getting bail for first-time drug offender was very difficult. Now, even if they are facing criminal charges, they got released on bail till the criminal case is decided. However, if it's drug offenders, it's not expected that we find them released on bail terms till the case is decided. So from the first moment they get arrested, we wouldn't expect to see them for a long time.
Gosh, yeah. Well, that's a decent old punishment there.
You deserve it.
Well, yeah, I agree. To be fair, if we were to, so we've looked at the sort of microcosm of this specific law and how things have changed for drug users versus drug dealers. If we pull the picture out a little bit and discuss the sort of overarching changes that we've seen to the criminal laws over the last 18 months. I mean, as a journalist, I've got a perspective on it, which is that a lot has changed within the legal profession. Would you agree?
Yes, I totally agree with you. The new philosophy behind the law is not just dealing with the drug offenders. It focuses more on the freedom of choice. It gives the individual the right, for example, to stay if they are not married, to have the relationship out of the wedlock. There are more changes came in Abu Dhabi with regards to the family law for non-Muslims, where the wife now is having very equal rights to the man, regardless the gender. We had plenty of changes, even applying the deportation in sexual crimes is not mandatory, even if the parties are married and they had sexual crime. It's not mandatory to get them deported, unlike before. So using alcohol is decriminalized at this point. So we have a lot of changes in the whole philosophy of law, but what you can see behind the law, that it gives more freedom to the expat. It gives them more freedom of choice. It gives them more comfort and more ability to produce while they can have the same life as if they were living in their home countries.
Really interesting to hear about those changes. Thank you so much, Dr. Hassan Elhais, legal consultant at Al Rawad and Associates here in the United Arab Emirates. Thank you very much indeed for your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.